Hey everybody, this is the Sliders Review, and I'm here today to talk to you about Fear the Walking Dead. No, this isn't a rundown of the entire series or a rundown of a specific season. It's more of a rant and of me just not being happy with the show in general. Like, I've never truly been happy with the show. It's not satisfying in any kind of way. It's just like I watch it out of necessity, and I kind of hate watch it but I only watch it because it has The Walking Dead in it. It has certain characters that I like, but for the most part, I've never truly ever been happy with this show, and there's a couple of reasons why. And I'm not the only person. Like, other people have had problems with this show since the beginning. I remember people used to make videos talking about how much the show sucks. And this was just back in the second season. People were talking about that in the first season. And then, the showrunners of The Walking Dead, because, they all work on the same show. But they saw the writing on the wall, and that's why they rebooted everything in the fourth season. Now, when they rebooted everything in the fourth season, like I said before, the first half I actually liked. It did what it was supposed to do. It made former Fear the Walking Dead fans start liking the show again. It brought in new fans. But, even some of them fans that came back, they still kind of didn't like it, but they still did. But then they screwed up in the second half. Then after the second half, in the fifth and sixth season, they just screwed up big time. But then in the beginning of the sixth season, when Morgan had that change once again, it was kind of cool, But then they screwed everything up again. I don't know what's wrong with these writers. They're just not doing a good job. And it's these people who have worked on The Walking Dead, so I don't understand. But that's another problem. Even The Walking Dead isn't good no more. It's like, I don't get it. It's like somebody is micromanaging what's going on behind the scenes, and they're screwing the show up. I don't know if it's AMC. I don't know if it's the showrunners. I just don't know. And this show has had 3 people who starred in it asked to leave the show. And and when you have your own stars telling you, hey, kill my character off, you have a problem with your show. The Nick actor, it took him 3 seasons to realize he wanted to leave. The Travis and the John character, it took them actors, it took them 2 seasons to realize they wanted to leave the show. 2 seasons. Then you got folks on The Walking Dead who want to leave, and they're taking on different projects. And then other folks who are on the show, the only reason why they don't want to leave is because they're getting a paycheck. But the people who are staying on the show, they're not writing anything for their characters to do. And it's getting to the point where fans are now starting to find other shows to watch because they don't want to watch The Walking Dead no more, or even Fear the Walking Dead. People are even starting now to go back to Resident Evil. And that movie franchise is over. And that movie franchise wasn't all that great. Only the first 3, and that's it. There are folks who went to Zomboat. Zomboat is just hilarious. It's a 2 group of strangers that meet, and they just fighting the zombie apocalypse. And it's just hilarious. They went to V Nation, but that got canceled too. But they go into other projects. But folks went to Van Helsing because, it's a show about not zombies, but vampires, but it's set up originally like The Walking Dead, but then they changed it because they're getting tired of the whole Walking Dead franchise formula because they're literally killing their own franchise. And that's what made AMC the hit that it is, The Walking Dead. And now The Walking Dead has killed that network. Now, I'm not defending the actions of the people, the showrunners of The Walking Dead, the original 3, I believe it was, because they had really crappy attitudes behind the scenes. Was it 3 or was it 2? I can't remember. I think it was 2 that had crappy attitudes, and then they brought in Gimple. And then Gimple kind of well, at first he did a good job, but then he kind of screwed the show up. But yeah, it's I'm not defending the first 2, but they made the show so much better. Maybe because, they had edge in real life and they brought an edginess to the show. Whereas the good people, sadly I have to say this, are soft, and they brought a soft quality to the show, and they kind of ruined the show. So the soft people need to think like the edgy people when it comes to making this show. Now, Dave Eckerson, he was the showrunner for the first 3 seasons. Then after that, he stepped down, and then these two dudes, Nestor Gimple, they became the showrunners since for season 4 and onward. But then Gimple has been an executive producer on the show, but it's like they're not producing anything good. And Scott Gimple, I have like no like faith in no more as a showrunner because he's not doing a very good job. He killed The Walking Dead, and then he killed further the Fear the Walking Dead. And you know, he created Fillmore. He created Fillmore, man. That was a great show. So how'd you screw up? Maybe you should just go back to animation, probably. I don't. Now, when it comes to Fear the Walking Dead, they had to be creative because I believe The Walking Dead was in its 5th season when Fear came on. So they had to be different. They had to be creative. And one of those things that they did is that they wanted to show what the zombie apocalypse looked like from the beginning. That was a great stepping stone for them. But they screwed that up. And how did they screw that up? Because it only lasted in the 1st season. And the thing about that is that when the zombie apocalypse happened in The Walking Dead, I believe it was 2 weeks. And in 2 weeks, the world just went like nuts and just started killing each other. And we saw that in the 1st season of Fear the Walking Dead. But, you know, the 1st season didn't have that many episode orders. I believe it only had 6. I don't remember exactly what all happened. All I remember is I saw Nick running from like a church high off his mind with a tight shirt on. I remember Madison was like a principal or a teacher at a school, and she had this one little student. I remember Alicia had a black boyfriend. And that's really all I remember. I remember a bunch of characters started coming in, and then they met Strand, who, you know, you thought was kind of like this good guy, but you knew he had some shadiness to him. And I remember him being like very blunt and forceful in the last episode, and then they went on a boat, and that's all I remember. And so for the most part, yeah, it did that. It showed the city in chaos. It showed like the military taking people out. But when the military was taking people out, I just remember them taking them out kind of like for a different reason. It was more like, because in The Walking Dead, it was more like, oh, they were scared of everybody turning to zombies, so they just started shooting people left and right. But this one, it was more like they had like an agenda as to why they was killing people, more like an evil, haha, take over the world kind of agenda. Like, that's all I really remember. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, you know, but that's all I remember. And the first 2 seasons should have dealt with them being in the city, fighting off the zombies in the zombie apocalypse. Because we didn't get to see that in the Walking Dead series. So it would have been great if they would have done that. However, come by like, well, I'll get that point later. But then, so it's like, you know, that was really rushed, and they should never have rushed that. They should have taken their time to give us that. Second problem I have with this show is locations. Like, the one thing about The Walking Dead is that, yeah, they changed locations too, but for the most part, they would stay in one spot for a couple of seasons. In the 1st season, they lived outside. In the 2nd season, they lived on a farm. In the 3rd season, it was a combination of them living in the prison and where the governor lived at. In the 4th season, it was just primarily just the prison. Then in the 5th season, they kept migrating from place to place until they eventually caught up in Alexandria. And then since season 5 and onward, they've just been living in Virginia. It's a combination of Hilltop, Alexandria, where the Saviors were, and I think it was called like the Kingdom, yeah, something like that. And then you had Oceanside and stuff like that. And so for the most part, they've stayed in one location, and those locations, for the most part, people are happy with, and they've been able to bring some interesting stuff until they weren't, because the show writers and the writers can't do what they're supposed to do and give us entertainment. But for the most part, yeah, it kept us in one location. We was happy, and you know, we got used to it, and there was a lot of cool stuff that came from it. However, Fear the Walking Dead changes location every single season, and they never give us a good time to have our minds sit down, relax, enjoy where we're at, because they get rid of that location halfway in to the season. And so, as to tell you the truth, it doesn't even change every season. It changes every half season. And so it's like you don't know where home is where the heart is because they keep changing. They should have kept, like I said before, the first two seasons in the city. We've seen it before for so many decades. Some of the best zombie storytelling is when it's in the city, whether it's at night, whether it's in the morning. It's great. And why is it great? Because there are millions of zombies in the city. There are like thousands of people and stuff. So you're constantly scared for your life to even leave your location, because if you leave your location, you're gonna wind up meeting a herd of zombies. And sometimes even if you stay in that one location, you can still meet a herd of zombies because they're gonna gather where you're at because they smell your flesh and everything. That's terrifying. That's fun. That's entertainment. And that's something that this show doesn't understand. And so, like I said, I don't remember much about the first season, but I do remember, them being in the city and stuff. And, and it's just great seeing that, like, atmosphere. Then they did something interesting in the second season. They put them on a boat. And that's actually something that I think, what's his face? T-Dog suggested in the second season of The Walking Dead. And so it's like, okay, that stuff was kind of interesting because it had a small group of people on a boat. Some of them knew each other, other ones didn't, and there was conflict here and there. But there was no zombie action, and that's what you want to see. But they always managed to bring in some type of zombie-like action somehow. Either have a zombie be stuck inside like the gears or something like that, or just something, or the paddle thingy. But then they introduce the pirates. I'll put a pin in them later. Let's get something else. So it's like the boat atmosphere, like, setting. That was kind of cool. It was different. And you do wonder how you're gonna survive a zombie apocalypse while you're on a boat. Easy. Every time you have to go back into the city for supplies, you're either gonna meet like zombie people or you're gonna meet like crazy living people. And so that's kind of like what happened. When they went on that island, they met some crazy people. Then they met some pirate people. But then there wasn't that much zombie like action and stuff. Then after that, I think the moment they got back on dry land, they split up, and then Madison and Alicia and Strand, they went to like a hotel. Then Nick went down to Mexico, I believe, and then Travis and his son just like traveled and stuff. And I didn't like the Mexico setting because it started to feel more like The Walking Dead, and that's what I did not want. I didn't want, cause it just slowed down the pace of the show. It was like a lot of outside Sandy type stuff, and it was just like a large group of people, and it was just everything just kept feeling way down. But I liked the stuff that happened in the hotel. In the third season, they went to like a farmhouse, and it was kind of interesting, but they dealt more with people than they dealt with zombies. But the farmhouse, that was just it. But at least they had a place where they could like stay for a good while until then the next. Oh, I forgot to mention, in the third season, after they left the farm, they went to like a dam, and so it's like, so it's like that place was cool. And then they got rid of that place. Then they went to the stadium. That was a very cool place, like the whole stadium thing. But the fourth season was a mixture of the stadium and them just randomly living in place to place because the season was like split up. And that's when they started doing the reboot and the flashbacks and the weird filter and stuff. But I did like the stadium. The stadium was cool. And I was hoping we'll get some more time there, but we didn't. Then comes the fifth season, and they pretty much just migrating from place to place and just not necessarily living outside, but living in like abandoned buildings and crap like that. And then in the sixth season, they was living in Virginia's like town, like what? Which is weird saying Virginia town because the Walking Dead is in Virginia, and it's just, they couldn't name her something else. But anyway, they were living in Virginia's place, and they was there for a good while of the fifth season, I should tell you. And then sixth season they wasn't. And then in the sixth season it was a combination of like Virginia's place and like that place that what's his face, Morgan was staying at, and then the place Teddy was staying at. And not only do they travel from location to location each season, but they go from like state to state. Like, okay, on The Walking Dead, they spent 4.5 seasons being in Georgia. Then in the second half of the fifth season, they made it all the way to Virginia, and they stayed there. On Fear the Walking Dead, they started off in Los Angeles, made their way to Mexico, made their way to, I don't know where they went after that, maybe back to California again, but then they made their way to Texas, and then they made their way all the way to Mississippi. I mean, they are like making the distance. But you know, it's all they're doing that only because, well, actually, I don't know why they keep going from like place to place and state to state. I know now the reason why they're doing it, because they had to connect themselves to the Rick movies, you know, with the helicopter people. But other than that, I don't know why they cut. They was doing that way before both shows had their crossover and stuff. And like another thing that kind of made this show kind of like suck is when they started to mimic The Walking Dead. When this show first started, like I said, it was different. This show had vibrant colors from like California, and as we know from The Walking Dead, being all the way from the South, they had more of a dreary wilderness, like outdoorsy kind of look to them and color palette. When we saw them wear clothes in Fear the Walking Dead, it was very different from what you see on The Walking Dead. It was kind of like season 1 of The Walking Dead, where they wore like actual clothes. And when you see The Walking Dead, they're dressed in very muted colors, button-up shirts, dingy clothes. Now all of a sudden, in Fear the Walking Dead, they're dressed in very dingy clothes, button-up shirts, shirts like, you know, like southern, more like southern country type style clothes. You don't see that like over in California, or like even, or you see it in Texas, but you don't see that in California. So it's just kind of weird how like their clothing style has now changed to mimic the parent show. It like it lost its identity because now it's trying to be the other show because they're desperate right now. They're struggling. And you know, chances are, like the people, like I said, the people who are still on the show, they probably would have left already. They're not getting paid. Like, why leave a cushy job? But at some point in time, this show is going to get canceled. I don't see this show making it to season 10 like The Walking Dead. The next problem is their characters. There are way too many characters on the show. And not only are there way too many characters, they have boring personalities, or they're just stupid. And if they're not stupid, then they follow somebody who's stupid. And then with the huge cast they have, they introduce more characters, and it's like, it's just too much. It's way too much. And that's the problem that The Walking Dead had when they kept introducing new characters and stuff. One of the great things about season 1 and 2 of The Walking Dead is that it had a medium-sized cast, but they was all in one location, so we just got to focus on them and nobody else. By the third season, we was focusing on everybody in the entire world, and that kind of like started to slowly ruin the show. Now, keeping with things that are different, one thing that Fear the Walking Dead did is that instead of grouping a bunch of strangers together with one little family, this show grouped 2 families together and added in a strange man that people was contemplating if he was shady or not. But the problem with that is that with Daniel's family, they kept disappearing from the show. Like, first Daniel's wife dies at the end of season 1, then somewhere in season 2, his daughter, I think her name is Sophia, she completely disappears from like the show. And then at some point in time, Daniel himself disappears from like the show, and you assume he's dead. Then coming into the 3rd season, then all of a sudden here comes Sophia again, and she has a completely different personality now. Now she's kind of with these people who are acting kind of bad, kind of good, and then she dies. And then Daniel shows up towards the halfway into like the third season, and he has a completely different personality. And then he disappears again after that. And then he disappears for the entirety of the fourth season. And then they find him randomly, like in the fifth season. Or, no, they find him somewhere, I think in the second half or maybe the fourth season or somewhere in the fifth. And then he has a completely different personality again. Because now he has a cat. And then his character's acting completely different and off the walls. And then next thing you know, we're done with the season. And it's kind of like when it comes to Daniel, it's like we don't know much about him. We know he interrogates people. We know he is very edgy. And now he's very nice with the cat and he can fool people and stuff. But he's always supposedly dying and then surviving somehow. And it's like, that's not enough for me to like grab onto because I don't really know who this dude is because y'all keep making him disappear from the show. Then we have like Madison's family, and it's like one thing fans have never really agreed on. Fans have never truly agreed on is who was exactly the leader in the first like two seasons. Some people thought it was Madison, some people thought it was Travis, some people think it was both. I always assumed it was Madison. But in the first season, yeah, you really can't tell in the first season. By the second season, it's pretty clear it was Madison. But then every time Travis would come back, it felt like it was him again until he would leave the show. And it's like one problem you have with this cast is they're always splitting up. They're constantly splitting up. Now, one thing that fans have always been debated about is like they don't either like this family or they don't like the characters or they don't like the stars that play them. For the most part, and yeah, it's nice to have different personalities. Like the thing about The Walking Dead is that everybody has their own distinct personality, their own distinct way they dress, their traits, stuff like that. And even when they start somewhat acting like each other, they still act completely different. Now, on Fear the Walking Dead, everybody has their own personality traits, but then after a while, everybody just starts acting like the same person, and with no defining traits, and it gets kind of stale and boring. Now, Nick was a character I never really liked because he was like the druggie and he was like the rebel and he took too many risks. And Madison and Alicia didn't like that either, so that's why I gravitated to them more and stuff. And also, I gravitated to Alicia a whole lot more because I like the actress because I seen her in the 100. Now, when it comes to the Madison character, I like her as a leader. I like that she will do anything, whatever it takes to keep her family alive. Like, she's more gun-ho than Rick was in the earlier seasons. And so it's like, but the problem is a lot of people didn't like the actress. They say she's kind of dull and boring in everything she acts in. I've only seen her act in this, so I really don't know. Um, but like, yeah. But then there's the Alicia character. But like a lot of people hated her character in the first three seasons. And I could understand why she was just kind of dull and boring and just there. But it was a contrast to who she was in the 100. But you know, the thing about her is that people have to remember the actress, even though she's in her 20s, she's playing a teenager. And you know, so it's like she's just this little girl who does what her mom says, and she's scared of like the monsters and the zombies and stuff like that. So I was okay with her being dull and boring in the first couple of seasons, you know. And then they didn't like her because she made mistakes. I was okay with her making mistakes because she's young, you know what I'm saying? And she never really experienced too much about life, so it was okay for her to make those mistakes. And then, of course, by somewhere in the third season, she started like to amp up her personality. She started being like not being afraid. She started fighting a whole lot more. She actually finally started killing zombies. That's something she didn't do before because she was just a little girl, you know, and stuff. And even though like a couple of weeks or a year has passed now, and then the fourth season, you know, she's a lot more tougher than what she was before. And she has to be now. She's the last member of her family that's alive. And because they kept splitting up the group, it's like when it comes to Travis, like he kept going off on his own because he had to take care of his son, because his son was kind of being like a bad boy, you know? And so it's like the show didn't really focus too much on him because, he was like off doing his own little thing, which kind of frustrated the actor. And that's why he wanted to leave the show. When they split up the group, it was, Nick and the Mexican group, and then it was Madison and the hotel people, and then it was just him in a couple of episodes to the point where you forgot he was even on the show. And then, when they brought in Luciana's character, she was very gullible, but she was also starting to be independent, think for herself, and be headstrong. Then come the third season, that all went away, and she barely shows up in the show. She's basically just collecting a paycheck. And then there's Charlie, You can always, like, from the start, you knew she was a bad girl after she betrayed the group and stuff. And then next thing you know, she goes on this whole, oh, leave me alone type thing. I have to, like, do things on my own, blah, 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 stuff like that. And I don't want to be around nobody. And then next thing you know, she joins the group, and then she does absolutely nothing. And then there's the fourth season. Now, I love the Morgan character when he was on The Walking Dead. He had two split personalities. Either he would be calm and, well, actually he had a couple of them. He'll be either calm and collective, or he'll be completely nuts, or he'll be all like, I just want to live a peaceful life, or then he'll be all like, just leave me alone, just let me be to myself. But no matter what, he was great, and he was great when he was paired with Rick. People want to see him with Rick, plain and simple as that. They started the show off together, and it should end with them, Then they brought him on to Fear the Walking Dead because their ratings had dropped, and then they needed somebody to boost the ratings. And because the show was in the past, people said bring in Abraham that could bring him back alive. They brought Morgan over instead to tie in both shows and to fix the timeline until The Walking Dead jumped a couple of years into the future, and now it's like, ugh. But anyways, since when he first appeared on Fear the Walking Dead, he was cool for the first 2 episodes, but then after that, people didn't understand where his place was, so they gave him a purpose. He did the whole leave me alone thing for a while until he met a group of people. Then when he met these group of people, he felt like it was his place to protect them, and like they was all like his best friends, like he'd known them for years, but he'd only known them for like a couple of days, couple of weeks. And then they ruined his character by making him like this super, super, super nice guy who has to like save everybody. It's his purpose to save everybody. And it's kind of like he lost what made him so great in The Walking Dead. Yeah, he saved people, but it's like he was still more like a warrior type person. Now he's just a giant softy and everything. Then they brought in people like Althea, who had the dumbest motivation ever. She just wanted to hear everybody's story, and she wanted to record this story, and she was obsessed with her tapes. And then it was just like people are like, where is this going? Like, this woman is just bizarre. And then they ended that. And then by the next season, she just has like a love story interest. After that, that ends quickly. And then she doesn't really do nothing. She just bops around with the other characters. And then, then you have like Sarah and the dude in the wheelchair, whose name I still don't know. It might be Sam. I really don't know. And it's like, their motivations was kind of dumb. At first, you couldn't really tell if they were the good people or the bad people because the way they treated Morgan. But then it's like, their whole purpose was to meet this guy, get some beer recipe, and then make like moonshine. And then they split those two up, and then the wheelchair dude disappeared, and then she's barely there. And it's just like, what's going on with that? Now, June was probably the most interesting character of them all, but not at first, because she kept changing her name, and then she had a lame purpose. Basically, she was a combination of Father Gabriel and the junkyard lady, which is funny because those two dated on the show. But then, like, yeah, it's just like, she kind of like betrayed her people a little bit by being a coward, and she kept changing her name. But then she met John, fell in love, and became a slightly more interesting character, but she had the best story arc of them all in the 6th season because she actually got to be her own person. And another thing that keep making this show suck is that they keep splitting up the main cast. And every time they split up the main cast, we meet a group of new people who are just as lame as the people before. The rabbi is lame. The black dude with dreads who's always spray painting and painting crap, he is super lame. And it's just like they keep bringing all these lame people. Another problem this show has is that the main villain always sucks. Fear the Walking Dead has a villain problem. Their villains are so one-dimensional and they're just bizarre. Like, the main villain of this show in The Walking Dead should always be zombies, but zombies started getting phased out somewhere by the 5th season of The Walking Dead, and that's around the time the show of Fear the Walking Dead started. And so they started off with zombies, but then they slowly started phasing them out. And then in the 1st season, I believe like the military people, like I don't really remember too much about the 1st season or 2 that much, but I do remember towards the end the military people started being the bad guys. And it was kind of like, okay, in The Walking Dead, we understood why they was killing people left and right because the zombie apocalypse started to happen. They thought everybody was turning, so they started killing everybody who they thought was infected. But with this, it seems like they have like a hidden motivation or agenda as to why they're acting bad all of a sudden. And it never made no sense. And so then next thing you know, they had Strand, who you assume is a bad dude, but then by the 2nd season, you realize, oh, he's just this really micromanaged type dude, and who's really grumpy, has a little shadiness and lies and stuff. But then in the 2nd season, you had kind of like these bandit type people, I think that was in Mexico, and they was causing trouble. And then in the 2nd season, you meet the hotel people, and they was cool at first, except for this one lady. And then when Travis killed like the one dude, they're like, oh, well, you have to leave. So, and then it's kind of like, okay, we think they might be the bad people because they stole their home, but nope. And I really like the hotel thing. They should have stayed in the hotel, man. But then one thing that was interesting is that they made Travis' son a villain, and then he joined 2 other bad people. And it's kind of like, whoa, this is something that's never really happened in The Walking Dead except for with Shane, but it took a long time with Shane. But when it happened with Travis' son, it was mostly, oh, he lost his mom and he just turned bad after that. And that wasn't really good build up, but still at least we had a villain. And then they killed him off screen. And then his 2 friends that killed his behind, they had Travis kill them within seconds. And then that's over in the 2nd season. But then we meet these other group of like militant people at the end of the 2nd season. And then in the 3rd season, we meet, what was his name? I forget his name. The dude who Madison spooned in the The dude that Madison spooned in the eye, he was a villain. His dad was a villain. His dad was like a racist. And it's like, so the foreign people was kind of bad. And then I don't really remember. I think he was just stealing people's land or some crap like that. And I just remember something that happened with oil. I don't really remember. Like, it's been a long time since I watched those seasons. And so it's like they were like lame villains because, God, what is the spoon dude's name? I forgot. I had it on my tip of my tongue like an hour ago, but I forgot. But then you could never tell if he was bad or good. He was just like a prick, you know what I'm saying? And just killed people for the sake of killing people. And so then it's like he was bad. Then in the 3rd season, when they got to the dam, he was like kind of turning good a little bit. And then he turned bad again. And and then he died in that and stuff in that explosion. And they didn't, and then that's another thing that pissed me off is that explosion. The 3rd season to the 4th season, they should have showed what happened. How did people survive that? They should have showed it, Anyway, but then there was also like a bad dude in the 3rd season. I think he was trying to take over the dam or something like that, and then he was bad and he was a good villain for a while, and then they killed his behind off. And yeah, The Walking Dead kills their villains after a season, but sometimes they last to a second one, you know? Then there's like the black lady from season 4 who wanted to make everybody strong. Her motivations were stupid as stupid could be. It's like she and her husband were hurt. These people didn't want to help them. Her husband died. She helped herself. Somehow she survived. And that made her stronger. And then she wanted to make everybody else stronger by either shooting, killing them, leaving them for dead, and having them survive on their own, or poisoning their drinking water to where, like, you know, they slowly die and they have to save themselves. But then I think she killed herself because her mission was over. I don't. That was the dumbest character ever. And they never explained why she dressed the way she did. They just wanted to make her look terrifying and crazy looking. And and so then, like, I think, what was it? In the second half of the 4th season, or maybe somewhere in the 5th season, then there was that dude they were supposed to give the beer recipe to or something like that. And then there was some dude who killed him ahead of time, and then that dude started being the villain. But before we can even start liking that dude, like, you know, they killed him, and then the Virginia stuff started happening. But the whole Virginia thing, she was like a combination of probably like, oh, I'll say the governor, not so much Negan, but so much more the governor. And probably, okay, she was a combination of the governor and the cop lady from season 5. And so she was a pretty interesting and good villain. A while in the 5th, she wasn't really all that interesting. She seemed kind of hokey, and we didn't know what her deal was. But then by the 6th season, she started being better, you know. And it's like, man, they really going somewhere with her. And then they killed her off. And then they gave us Teddy, and Teddy was just a lunatic. He was just nuts in the head. Should have been like in a mental place. And his whole motivation, nuking everybody and then repopulating, like, that was just so stupid. So then the villain went from being this lunatic crazy man with a nuke to the actual nuke itself. And it's just like, how do you make a nuke the villain? Like, you know, the show should have just ended with everybody dying. Now, I will say, the most interesting villains they ever really had actually was in the beginning of the 4th season with all the flashback stuff. They were good. It was like, I think they called themselves the Ravens or something like that. Or they were like these scavenging type people. And they were so intimidating. Like, they would literally go to where your home is, wait outside and wait for you to come out and wait to kill you and stuff. Or they would send somebody in who's like a mole and they would have that person kill you, which they did with Chuck. And then so they were so cool and so interesting. And then, of course, when they killed Madison, when she had to sacrifice herself, our group of people went hunting for them, and it was just so good and so intense. But then, of course, what happened? They got killed off in the half of the 1st season. Now, Dakota was like a screwed up person. You think she's sweet and innocent because that's how they built her up, but then they turned her crazy and just started killing people. They probably wanted to do that with Chuck, but because they screwed that storyline up, they had to, like, you know, make it up with her character. So they did it with Dakota, and the Dakota actress did such a great job of being crazy. But she just started killing people for stupid motivations. Like, she killed the one dude because he saw her leave the place and she didn't want Virginia to find out. And then when John found out, she killed him. And then all of a sudden, she threatened to kill everybody if you just didn't let her be who she wanted to be and all this other crap. And it's just like, she would never been like a big baddie to have her own army, but maybe she could have. Maybe she could have aligned herself with a group of kids who disappeared and were never seen again. Speaking of which, and then there's like the black bounty hunter dude from season 6. And then Morgan kills him off in just a few episodes in the beginning. And it's like, dude, he was awesome. Another thing that makes this show sucks is that people are constantly disappearing from the show. And then when they do reappear, they're completely different than who they used to be. Sophia, Daniel, them group of kids who still have not been heard from, like, what happened to them? And then not only that, but Then there's the dude in the wheelchair. What was the point of making him a main character and making him Sarah's brother if they weren't going to do anything with him? And then there's all of the genius people and like the ranger people and stuff. They have now all disappeared or been nuked. And then of course, there's all of them different groups from like the past, and it's like then they randomly start showing up again, and then their personalities are so different. And I get it. This is one thing the show likes to do. It likes to change people's personalities up, flip flop all the time. But they do it way too many times to where it just doesn't make any sense. Now, one thing that's always made The Walking Dead great was tension amongst the characters. And there was a lot of dramatic moments. And so it built for great build up. Now, when they talk to each other and have tension, is just soapy, soap opery, mushy type stuff, and it's lame and it's boring. Fear the Walking Dead has always had kind of like that mushy stuff to it, but it always had that edge to it. It was great between Madison and Nick. Those two could never get along. And Alicia just had to sit there and watch, and then Alicia didn't like Nick because he was constantly getting in trouble. That would make the show interesting because they was an actual family with actual family problems, and that's how it really should have been. They constantly should have had tension amongst each other, like Travis family and Madison family. But after a while, it gets squashed, and then they just move on from that. Like when Madison kicked Nick out of the group, I was like, "You go, girl! Like, get rid of that dude because he's gonna get your family killed and everything." Because he's not taking it seriously and he's just goofing around and stuff. And then, when he went down to Mexico, he became a better person because he actually learned, what Madison was trying to teach him about not being reckless and caring about other people and stuff. So then you think he would have applied those traits to like the group, and he kind of did in the beginning of the third season, but then he relapsed again, and then from drugs, and he just became same old Nick and stuff like that. And Luciana made him a better character because she kept him grounded and stuff. And, and that was cool. But, you still have them like tense moments, but they're more, oh, I just hate you because you betrayed our people, like Daniel and Strand. So, those two go at it. But then those two, like, move on from each other. And it's like, no, bring that back. This show needs that kind of tension. And Nick and Strand, not Nick and Strand, but Daniel and Strand would be great tension for like the show because Strand is literally a bad guy and has always been a bad guy who has used people. And Daniel sees that. That's why those two don't get along. They were similar to Shane and Dale. But now you have a group of people who all get along and it's just boring when it's like that. Like, that's one of the reasons why I like, what is it? Zombo and Freakish. With Freakish, like I said before, with Freakish, it's a group of high school students who are stuck in a high school and there are zombies all around outside. What caused the zombie apocalypse was this chemical plant. It exploded and this fog has seeped through the sky and permeated the entire like city. And the fog will not go away. You sniff this fog, you turn into a zombie. There's little zombie action because they rarely get in. But when it is zombie action, it's pretty cool. But what makes this show great, it's a small cast. They're in one location only, and they're dealing with their personal drama problems. Because some of the students know each other, some of them don't. Other ones have heard of other students. There's that bad guy, there's this good guy, there's a love triangle, and it's just like, it's great drama attention. It's like, because they're dealing with like personal issues along with a zombie apocalypse, it makes for like a great storytelling. And then when they have to like fight them off and they have to like work as one, it makes it even much better because we know these people hate each other, but they will work together to save each other. And when the one girl sacrificed herself to save everybody, it was the most dramatic thing I ever seen. Way more dramatic than anything I saw in The Walking Dead or Fear the Walking Dead. Because she was a pregnant teenager. She had been given like poison by the government. Oh yeah, the government shows up in the second season and kind of does like a Resident Evil type thing. It kind of makes for a crappy season, but it also makes for a more interesting season because you just can't have people just sitting around talking about their feelings all the time, season per season. But yeah, that's what happens. But anyway, she sacrifices herself. And she fell in love with the bad boy, and the bad boy is starting to turn good. And then he has this huge dramatic moment when he sees her die, and it was just heartbreaking, And Fear the Walking Dead doesn't have that. Seriously, I mean, just look at the promotion picture. Just look at it. It's silly. I mean, look at Alicia. She never does that in the show. And then Luciana in the background, in the far left, she's mimicking Alicia's pose. And it's like, what is this? You never see a picture like this for The Walking Dead because it's too hokey and everything. And if your promotion picture looks like this, then the show is hokey. Alrighty, well, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.